What happens when a man trained to fight crime witnesses the woman he loves being attacked by the very man sworn to protect the innocent? She was 8 months pregnant. Him was a police officer, and in just 43 seconds, he kicked her so hard, she would never meet her child. She was on her way home. No crime, no threat, just a belly full of life. And yet, he struck. On the other side of the city, her husband Malik was counseling another veteran when a video clip arrived on his phone. Only 43 seconds. Shaky, blurry, but clear enough to change everything. A soldier became a father. He didn't cry. He swore. If the law won't protect her, I will. And now, the city that abandoned her is about to burn under the light of truth. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late spring, and the air in East Florence, Georgia, carried the gentle scent of pine and fresh-cut grass. The sidewalks were warm underfoot, speckled with patches of afternoon sun filtering through the neighborhood's tall sycamores. Children's voices echoed faintly from a nearby elementary school. A lawn sprinkler ticked rhythmically in the distance. Naomi Rivers walked along the sidewalk at her usual pace, slow, deliberate, with one hand resting on her stomach. She was 8 months pregnant. Her other hand held a brown paper bag, its top folded neatly. Inside were a bundle of fresh green onions, a pint of buttermilk, and 3 Valencia oranges that had left soft, round impressions against the paper. Naomi was a quiet woman by nature. Not timid, just calm. Her co-workers at the Florence Public Library often said she had a voice that made even overdue fines sound comforting. She'd worked there part-time for 4 years, mostly reshelving books and helping seniors navigate the internet. Today's shift had been uneventful, a few reference questions, a missing biography in the 900s, and a toddler's story time that left behind more giggles than mess. Now she was walking home. Naomi didn't take the bus, even though the stop was just 1 block from the library entrance. Her husband Malik had insisted she stop walking once she reached her 3rd trimester. But she'd only smiled and said the walk helped her think. Truth was, those 30 quiet minutes between library and front door had become her sanctuary. A time when no one needed her to smile or explain. A time when she could feel the baby move and imagine who it might become. Today, like every day, she traced the familiar path, past the flower shop run by the elderly twins, Janice and Joan, past the mural of civil rights heroes painted across the community center walls still vibrant despite years of sun, past the little church with chipped white paint and a sign that read, "Love thy neighbor, no exceptions." Naomi wasn't in a hurry. The bag bumped softly against her hip as she walked. The baby shifted inside her, a small nudge against her ribs. She smiled and whispered, "I know. We're almost home." The neighborhood was quiet. A few teenagers sat on a porch 2 houses down, headphones in, nodding to music. A UPS driver waved as he passed. It was the kind of place that felt safe in broad daylight. Familiar, predictable. That's why she noticed the patrol car right away. It was parked 1 block ahead. Engine still running, white with navy trim. Florence Police Department logo on the door. Naomi's breath caught, not out of fear. Exactly. Just a pause. A note of dissonance in an otherwise peaceful song. She slowed slightly but kept walking. She'd done nothing wrong. She was just a woman, black, pregnant, carrying groceries, walking home at 3 p.m. in the suburbs. Still, she felt it. That tightening in the chest. That ancient reflex centuries old telling her to straighten up. Be polite. Stay small. She exhaled through her nose and kept moving. As she approached the intersection, the patrol car pulled forward, slowly, purposefully. Its tires made a soft crunch over the street grit. Naomi glanced sideways. The driver's window was down halfway. Inside. She saw a white man, maybe in his late 30s, wearing sunglasses and a shaved haircut. His eyes were hidden, but his head followed her as she walked. She looked away, not out of guilt, out of calculation. Don't look too long. Don't look afraid. Don't look defiant. Just keep walking. The car didn't pass her. It rolled alongside, slow enough to keep pace. The windows stayed down. Naomi could feel him watching her. Her fingers tightened around the paper bag. One of the oranges shifted. "Afternoon, ma'am," the officer said. Naomi turned her head slightly. "Good afternoon," she replied, her voice calm. Her tone carried no challenge, but no apology either. "Where you headed?" she answered. "Just walking home from work?" He nodded once. "Library." She nodded too. "Yes, sir." A brief pause. The car kept rolling. Naomi kept walking. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Naomi didn't stop walking. But her steps grew more cautious. The patrol car now inched closer, its engine a low, persistent hum beside her. The officer hadn't said anything else. Yet his silence felt heavier than his words. Her instincts sharpened. Something in the air had shifted. The sunlight still touched the rooftops, still danced on the leaves. But for Naomi, the day no longer felt warm. She wasn't sure what it was, exactly his tone, the way the car lingered, the angle of his jaw as he watched her, but she knew when attention turned into suspicion. "Mind if I ask your name?" the officer called again. Louder this time. Naomi slowed to a stop, clutching her grocery bag tighter. "Naomi Rivers," she replied. "Do I need to show ID?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he parked the car, stepped out, and approached. Naomi's eyes took in the details without fully meaning to his badge read Donnelly, his belt heavy with tools of control, and his expression unreadable behind the tint of his glasses. "You live around here, yes," she said. "Just a few blocks north." Got proof his question landed like a slap. Naomi blinked. "I wasn't aware I needed proof to walk in my neighborhood." Donnelly's smile was tight, almost amused. "Just asking. You seem nervous." "I'm 8 months pregnant," she replied, her voice even. "And I'm being followed by a police officer while walking home. I think that explains it." For a brief second, his jaw twitched. He stepped closer. Too close. Naomi stood her ground, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "You sure you're not out here for something else? I saw you pass by twice this week." "Same time." "I walk this way every day after work," Naomi said. "Same route, same sidewalk." Donnelly's eyes dropped to the brown paper bag in her hand. He nodded at it. "What's in the bag?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She didn't want to escalate anything, but every instinct told her this wasn't just a routine check. She slowly opened the top, revealing the groceries, oranges, buttermilk, scallions. "And what's under that?" he asked, leaning closer. "Nothing." "Mind if I check?" "Yes," Naomi replied, firmly. "I do mind." Her voice was polite, but her stance was clear. The sidewalk stretched quiet and sunlit, yet it felt like they stood alone in a courtroom without a jury. Donnelly's face hardened. "Ma'am, you're beginning to act uncooperative. I've answered your questions. I've broken no laws. I'm going home." Naomi took one step back, not away, just reclaiming her space. "Please don't follow me anymore." But Donnelly didn't like being told no. His voice dropped an octave. "Take your hand off your stomach." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me, take your hand off your stomach," he repeated. "I need to make sure you're not hiding anything." Her heart pounded. I'm protecting my child. And I'm protecting this neighborhood, he said coldly. Now move your hand. Naomi didn't move. She stood tall, her fingers pressed to her belly, not in defiance, but in defense. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice shaking now. There's nothing in my hands, nothing on me. Donnelly stepped forward fast, too fast, and in one motion, quick, sharp, he shoved her back by the shoulder. Naomi gasped, stumbling. The bag slipped from her grip, hitting the sidewalk. An orange rolled out. Don't touch me, she shouted. But before she could steady herself, his leg came up in one brutal, horrifying kick. It struck her square in the belly. The world slowed. Her body folded inward. Her knees collapsed. The sidewalk rushed up to meet her. The scream she let out wasn't loud. It was jagged, broken, more breath than sound. She cradled her stomach, pain rippling through her in waves. The spilled groceries lay scattered, one orange split open, juice pooling on the pavement like blood. Donnelly stood still, face unreadable. For a moment, time froze. The street was silent. Naomi lay in the middle of the sidewalk, unmoving, breath shallow. One hand clawed around her stomach, the other pressed to the concrete, across the road. Someone gasped. A woman stepped out of a nail salon, phone already raised. Another man dropped his coffee, voice trembling. She's pregnant, oh my God, she's pregnant. And in that single moment, the sunny afternoon shattered. The sound of Naomi's body hitting the pavement still hung in the air when her blood began to spread slowly across the cracks between the bricks. Her face was turned to the side, cheek pressed to the ground, one eye wide open, tears mixing with the red. Her breath was shallow, every inhale a sharp sting through her ribs and belly. She wasn't thinking clearly anymore, just holding on. Arms wrapped protectively around her unborn child, whispering words she didn't even understand. Donnelly stood above her, motionless, as if calculating his next move. Then, without saying a word, he turned back to his cruiser, walked slowly, deliberately, and sat inside, leaving the door open, not a glance backward, not a flicker of regret. It was like he had just stepped on a bug. A man across the street finally found his voice. "Call an ambulance," he yelled. "Somebody call 911, she's not moving." The woman who had been recording dropped her phone for a moment, frozen in disbelief, hands trembling. Then she scrambled to pick it up, whispering, "Oh my God. I just saw a cop kick a pregnant woman in the stomach." Her fingers tapped the screen, uploading the footage to her Instagram before she could second-guess herself. The ambulance was still at least 7 blocks away. No sirens yet. The man with the coffee bag crouched next to Naomi but didn't dare touch her. Miss, can you hear me?" Naomi blinked slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her hands still clutched her stomach. But she couldn't tell if the baby was still moving. She didn't feel anything anymore, not the warmth of the sun, not the sting of the sidewalk, just a growing void. In the distance, faintly, the wail of a siren began to rise. Too soft, too slow. Donnelly remained in his car, sunglasses still on, face expressionless, one hand on the steering wheel, the other tapping lightly against the dashboard as if nothing had happened. He didn't even radio for help. Naomi's body shifted slightly, a twitch in her leg, a whisper of movement. The young woman with the phone took a step forward, heart pounding, unsure if she should help or if she would be next. A breeze blew through the street, lifting Naomi's hair slightly. The spilled orange nearby began to dry under the sun, juice seeping into the bricks like a stain that wouldn't wash away. Then the sirens grew louder, closer. A fire truck, followed by a white ambulance, turned onto the block, lights spinning red and white. People stepped back, pointing, shouting. It was the cop. He did it. She was just walking home. She didn't do anything. Paramedics jumped out, rushed to Naomi, their hands already gloved, voices low and fast. Female, late pregnancy, blunt force trauma, rapid drop in BP, possible placental abruption, one said grimly. Naomi's eyes fluttered. One of the medics gently touched her face. "Ma'am, you're going to be okay. Stay with us." She wanted to speak. She wanted to say her baby's name, though she hadn't even picked one yet. But all that came out was a faint wheeze, a whimper, a fading plea. They lifted her onto the gurney, her limbs limp, dress soaked in blood, her grocery bag crushed beneath the wheels. Donnelly still hadn't moved. When the medics glanced at him, he said nothing. He didn't even offer to help, just rolled up his window slowly. The engine rumbled. Then, as the ambulance doors slammed shut, he drove away. No lights, no urgency, no accountability. And as the ambulance peeled off toward New Hanover Medical, its siren finally screaming at full volume, the sidewalk remained littered with crushed oranges, streaks of blood, and the faint smell of buttermilk from the torn paper bag. The witnesses stood silent. Some cried, some recorded. All of them carried the same haunted question. Did we just watch a child die in daylight? Malik Carter was never a man who panicked easily. Years in the military had carved that out of him. He knew how to compartmentalize, how to move through chaos with calm precision, how to react only when the mission demanded it. But on that Thursday afternoon, at exactly 5:41 p.m., he felt something he hadn't felt since the day his best friend bled out in Kandahar. It wasn't panic, it was something colder. He was sitting at his desk at the Veteran Support Center, going over intake paperwork for a young Marine who had just arrived home from his second tour. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of an old fan. The moment his phone buzzed the first time, he ignored it. Clients came first, but then it buzzed again, and again. 3 short bursts, back to back. He didn't look until the fourth, and then everything changed. The message came from an unknown number. Short, brutal. Your wife is in emergency care, New Hanover Hospital, ER3. No punctuation, no name, just raw, digital urgency. Malik stared at the screen for 2 full seconds, the words not registering. Then another message dropped. A video, blurry, 46 seconds long. He tapped it open, still in disbelief. And what he saw shattered the fragile peace he'd built since the day Naomi told him she was pregnant. The footage opened with Naomi on the sidewalk, her soft white maternity dress catching the sun. He recognized the bag of oranges in her hand, the ones she bought just for him. She looked so peaceful, so familiar. The next second came the officer. The approach, the shove. Naomi's voice, he could hear it in his bones, even if the video had no sound. Then the kick, swift, violent, unforgiving. She doubled over like a paper doll, dropped to the ground. Blood, silence. And Malik's own scream, the one he didn't realize, had escaped his mouth, ripped through the office. He threw the phone onto the table like it was a burning coal. But it was too late. The image had seared into him, lodged in the soft flesh behind his eyes, deeper than any wound he'd ever taken. His vision blurred, not from tears, from something worse. Rage, white-hot, bone-deep. He grabbed his keys, bolted from the office, knocking over a chair as he ran. The receptionist called out after him, but he didn't hear. Outside. He jumped into his old red pickup and floored the gas. Wilmington's afternoon traffic meant nothing now. He ran every red light between the center and New Hanover Hospital. His mind screamed questions as he drove. Is she alive? Was she alone? What the hell happened? Why wasn't I there? But no answers came. only the pounding of his heart and the memory of her laughter that morning as she kissed him goodbye, her hand resting lightly on her belly. "Don't be late tonight. I've got a surprise," she'd whispered. And now that moment belonged to another lifetime. When he reached the hospital, he left the truck running, keys still in the ignition. The emergency room was a blur of white walls and uniforms. He barely heard the nurse at the desk before she pointed to the hallway. "Emergency room 3. Down that way, on the right." He sprinted, not walked, not jogged. Sprint. Like time was something he could outrun. And then he saw her. Naomi, his wife. The woman who had pulled him out of the shadows of war with nothing but kindness and honey tea. She lay on a gurney, blood staining the sheets around her hips, her face pale, eyes closed. A machine beeped next to her, too steady, too fragile. A nurse pushed a cart of equipment beside her. A doctor adjusted her IV. No one looked at Malik until he shouted her name. "Naomi." The doctor turned. "Sir, you need to wait outside." Malik didn't move. His feet were cemented to the ground. "That's my wife, my child." Is the baby? He couldn't even finish the sentence. The doctor's face was hard to read. Professional. But behind the calm eyes was a tension Malik recognized. The kind of tension people wore when they were trying not to say something unspeakable. "We're doing everything we can," the doctor said. Then, softer, "Please, let us work." Malik stood frozen as the doors closed in front of him. He could still see Naomi's feet, her white canvas shoes now streaked with blood. His mind replayed the moment from the video over and over. The officer didn't yell, he didn't warn, he just kicked and walked away. That was the part Malik couldn't forgive. Not the violence. He'd seen worse in war. But the indifference. The way that man walked away like Naomi's life was disposable. Like his child was collateral. Malik turned away from the doors and collapsed onto a bench in the hallway. His hands trembled. Not from fear. From the need to destroy something. He had no weapon. No orders. No mission. But he had purpose. And right now, that purpose was to make sure the world would never forget Naomi's name or the child they were about to lose. He took out his phone. The video was already spreading, shared, reposted, commented on. One account had already written "pregnant woman kicked by cop in Wilmington." Baby's fate unknown. Thousands of views, dozens of comments. Some called it fake, others demanded justice. Malik didn't care. He opened his contacts and scrolled down to a name he hadn't touched in 3 years. Marcus Price, a former Marine turned civil rights attorney, the man who once said, "I don't sue to win. I sue so they don't dare do it again." Malik pressed call. 3 rings. Then a voice. "Malik, I need you." Malik said, his voice hoarse. "Not for me. For Naomi." "What happened?" Marcus asked, already serious. "A cop kicked her," Malik said, his words slow, deliberate, in the stomach. "She was 8 months pregnant." Silence. Then Marcus said, "I'll be there in the morning." Malik hung up. He looked at the doors again. Still closed. The hallway felt too quiet now. Too clean. Too far from the chaos in his chest. He sat in that hallway for what felt like hours, watching nurses walk past, hearing the beep of monitors, feeling time stretch around him like a rubber band about to snap, every once in a while. He would replay the video, not because he needed to see it, but because he refused to forget. He wanted to feel the same fury every time, until something changed. Eventually, a nurse came out, young, pale, nervous. "You can see her now," she said, "but we're still monitoring closely." Malik stood. He was about to open the door when the nurse added, "There's something else." We may need to prep for emergency surgery. The baby isn't responding well. Malik nodded. No words, no prayers. Just the sound of his boots as he stepped into the room where Naomi lay. Still, quiet, but alive. He sat beside her, took her hand, held it tightly. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just waited. Because the man who got the message understood one thing clearly now. Silence was no longer an option. The night Naomi lost the baby, the sky over Wilmington didn't turn black. It stayed a soft shade of gray, like the world was unsure whether to mourn or remain numb. Streetlights flickered. Cars still drove past, somewhere not far. Someone laughed. The world didn't pause. But inside the hospital, in that narrow, sterile room where Naomi lay, curled around nothing, time fractured. The doctor had delivered the words slowly, carefully. We did everything we could, but the baby didn't survive the trauma. He had said the baby, not your son, not your child. The words fell like glass onto the tile floor, polite, clinical, final. Malik had heard them, but didn't respond. He didn't ask what went wrong. He didn't cry. He just turned toward Naomi and sat back down beside her bed. She hadn't spoken since waking. Her eyes remained open but unfocused, staring at a wall with no pictures, no flowers, nothing but a clock ticking in steady betrayal of the moment they would never get back. The fetal heartbeat monitor had been removed. The quiet absence of its once steady beep felt louder than any alarm. Naomi's hand lay on her belly, instinctively, as if still trying to protect what was no longer there. Malik wanted to say something, anything, but what words existed for this kind of pain? She finally broke the silence. Do you think he knew her voice was brittle, barely above a whisper? Malik turned to her, confused. Who? Our baby, she said, eyes still on the wall. Do you think he knew he was loved? Malik couldn't speak, his throat locked. He just nodded, slowly, and placed his hand over hers. I talked to him every night. She continued, read to him from that old recipe notebook your mother gave us. I think he liked the part about dumplings. He always kicked when I said rosemary. Malik smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Naomi finally turned her head to face him. Her eyes were dry, but her voice trembled with the weight of 1,000 unshed tears. I didn't even give him a name. Malik leaned in, his voice low, steady, and full of something deeper than grief. Then let's give him one now. Naomi blinked slowly. Malik opened the drawer beside the hospital bed and pulled out the folded ultrasound image. It had been in his jacket pocket since the day she gave it to him. The corners were worn, the image faded, but the tiny white flicker, their child, was still there forever, frozen in that moment of early promise. He laid it gently on her chest and whispered, Eli. Naomi closed her eyes, and a tear escaped. Just one. She didn't speak, didn't nod, but the way her lips moved, silently mouthing the name, was enough. The next morning, while Naomi slept, Malik stepped outside the hospital and made a call. Not to Marcus this time, or Rosa, not to any lawyer or journalist. He called a number saved under a single letter M. No last name, no label, just that. M. The man who picked up had a voice like rusted gravel. Malik Carter. Malik inhaled, then said slowly, I need your help. I want to find everything about this officer, his past, his complaints, what they buried, and I don't care how deep we have to dig. There was a pause. Then M spoke again. You're not calling as a soldier anymore, are you? Malik shook his head. No, I'm calling as a father. Later that same day. Naomi sat up in bed. She looked stronger, but not in body, in will. Her hair was still matted against the pillow, her arms still weak. But her eyes had fire again. She picked up the notebook where she'd once written meal plans, baby names, and silly notes to Malik. She opened to a blank page, wrote only one line. He had a name. Say it. Malik saw it. He nodded. That night, they went live together on a simple, silent video. No music, no editing. Just Naomi sitting in her hospital bed, pale but radiant, holding the ultrasound image. I wasn't going to speak, she began. I didn't want to become a symbol. I didn't want a hashtag. I wanted peace. But you don't get peace when silence becomes permission. She held up the photo. His name was Eli Carter. He was my son, and a police officer took him from me. Not by accident, not by fear, but by choice. Malik appeared beside her. Not angry, not shaking, just solid. And now we speak, he said. For him. The stream ended after 2 minutes. No donation link, no call to protest, just a name. And by morning, that name had traveled far. Michael Stewart, Yoker say his name Eli Carter, justice for Naomi. People started whispering the name, then saying it, then writing it in chalk on sidewalks, in marker on cardboard, in permanent ink on skin. He had a name, and now the world would remember it. Weeks passed. The hospital bed was gone. The bruises on Naomi's body began to fade. But the wound beneath her ribs, where Eli should have been, remained open. Raw. Permanent. The apartment was quiet, filled with the echoes of things that never happened. No cries in the night, no lullabies, no tiny socks on the drying rack. But one thing stayed. The fight. It didn't come from anger anymore, not the kind that burns fast and dies. What lived now in Malik and Naomi was a different fire. The kind that simmers beneath the surface. Slow, relentless. A fire that doesn't seek revenge but refuses to forget. Malik sat at the dining table every night, long after Naomi went to bed, combing through evidence with Rosa and Marcus over encrypted calls. Every page, every buried complaint, every name that had once been filed and forgotten, they brought it back. He wasn't building a lawsuit anymore. He was building a case against the entire system. One evening, Naomi walked into the room and placed something on the table, a single candle in a glass jar. The scent honey citrus was one she had bought during her pregnancy, back when she'd imagined lighting it beside Eli's crib. I want it here now, she said. For him. Malik nodded, lit the wick, and they sat in silence, the flame dancing between them. The next day, Naomi spoke at a local town hall. It wasn't planned. She had come just to listen. But when the speaker dismissed the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding, Naomi stood. No microphone, no prepared speech. My son was kicked to death on the sidewalk, she said, and you call it unfortunate. The room froze. I was walking home. I wasn't angry. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dangerous. I was 8 months pregnant. Her voice never wavered. I still hear people say, "We don't know what happened before the video started." I'll tell you what happened. He followed me. He stared at me. He decided what I was before I opened my mouth. She took a breath. I didn't lose my child to chaos. I lost him to certainty. The certainty in that man's eyes that I didn't belong, that I could be erased. The silence afterward was deafening. But from the back row, someone began to clap. Slowly, then another, and another. That clip went viral, not for its production or drama, but for its quiet power. A mother, still hollowed by loss, standing in front of strangers, daring to tell the truth. Meanwhile, Lexi uploaded the uncut CCTV footage. It proved what Naomi said Donnelly had parked minutes before Naomi appeared. He had waited, chosen his moment. There was no misunderstanding. With that video, the public tide turned. Online outrage surged. Calls flooded city council offices. A petition to fire Donnelly hit 500,000 signatures in 48 hours. National news picked up the case. Cable networks aired interviews with Rosa, Marcus, and even Malik, who now rarely showed his face, choosing instead to let Naomi's words lead. But behind the scenes, they prepared for the hardest battle of all the courtroom. The civil suit was only part of it. They also pushed for a criminal investigation. For weeks, they faced obstruction, delay, and red tape. But with mounting pressure and mounting evidence, including the anonymous audio recording from Andre Wells, they finally got what few thought possible. Rick Donnelly was indicted. Naomi watched the news from their couch. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She whispered one word, Ellie. Then came the trial. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. The defense called it an unfortunate overreaction. They played up Donnelly's record, his years of service, his stress. They said Naomi didn't comply, that her behavior was ambiguous. But the jury watched the video. They heard the audio, and they saw Naomi on the stand, telling them, I didn't just lose a baby. I lost a future, a name, a boy who never got to see sunlight. It was enough. Rick Donnelly was found guilty, not just of excessive force, but of assault resulting in fetal death. It was the first time in the state's history that a police officer was convicted on behalf of an unborn child. Outside the courthouse, a candlelight vigil formed. Naomi and Malik stood in the crowd, silent, not as victims, not as symbols, but as people who had chosen to speak when silence would have been easier. And the world listened. Soon after, the Celeste Act passed its first vote. The Monroe Initiative received federal interest. Naomi was asked to speak in schools, to lawmakers, to future officers. She didn't always say yes, but when she did, she ended every talk the same way. Eli wasn't a statistic. He was loved before he had a name. And because of that, he will never be forgotten. One morning, Naomi received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. A baby boy, wrapped in a blanket, lying peacefully in a crib at a shelter in another city. The note read, I named him Elijah, for your son, because your voice reached me before fear could. Naomi pressed the photo to her chest. That night, she placed it beside the candle, and as the flame flickered in the dark, Malik whispered, the fire didn't die. The price of silence. The city of Wilmington had returned to its routines. The buses still ran, the sidewalks still filled with hurried footsteps. The courthouse, once crowded with protesters and press, now stood quiet under the afternoon sun. But something had changed. Not in the buildings, not in the laws, but in the air. In the eyes of those who now crossed the same sidewalk where Naomi Carter once fell. For many, the verdict marked an end. The justice system had spoken. The officer was behind bars. The headlines moved on. But Naomi and Malik knew better. The real battle was only beginning. Because racism doesn't need a badge to exist. It hides behind paperwork, in policies, in glances, in the quiet decisions made behind closed doors by people in power who never raised their voices, but never raised a hand to stop the violence either. Rick Donnelly was not an accident. He was a product of a system that teaches some men to fear darker skin, fuller lips, thicker hair, that teaches them a pregnant black woman walking home is a potential threat. Not a mother, not a human, not worthy of dignity, and worse, a system that protects those men when they act on that fear. For years, Donnelly had used that uniform like armor. not to protect others, but to shield himself from accountability. And he wasn't alone. Behind him was an entire wall of silence. Supervisors who ignored complaints, officers who saw too much and said too little, community leaders who prioritized image over truth, media voices who twisted stories into suspicion, and everyday citizens who looked the other way because it's not my fight. But when Naomi Carter lay bleeding on the sidewalk, her unborn son slipping quietly into death, that silence became complicity. Every time someone watched the video and asked, "What did she do wrong?" Every time someone said, "Not all cops are like that," instead of asking how Donnelly stayed in uniform for over a decade. Every time someone shared a conspiracy instead of the truth, a wall was rebuilt. And Malik Carter had had enough of walls. He once believed war was fought with guns and orders. Now he knew the greatest battles were fought with memory and refusal. Refusal to stay quiet. Refusal to let a child's death be swept under the rug of a system that had failed. Through the Monroe Initiative, they began to document every case they could find. Not just police brutality, but the slow bleed of racism in hospitals, in schools, in hiring offices, in traffic stops, in prisons. Naomi called them wounds that never made the news. They partnered with other survivors, with mothers who had buried their sons, with teachers who had been fired for speaking up, with former officers who carried guilt heavier than their old vests. Together, they created a national registry of misconduct once erased from public record. They exposed sealed settlements, silenced whistleblowers, and training programs built more for war than community care. They taught young activists how to fight using facts, not fear. And still, Naomi never forgot the day Eli died. She refused to, because that memory, that sidewalk, that bag of oranges, the sound of a footstep that turned into a weapon, it was a truth America needed to keep seeing. Not to relive trauma, but to remember the cost of forgetting. 1 year after the trial, a mural was painted across the side of a city building in downtown Wilmington. It showed Naomi, her arms outstretched, holding a candle. Behind her, the faint outline of a heartbeat glowed like starlight in the sky. And beside her stood a child no older than 2 eyes wide, hand reaching upward. The mural had no title, just a line written at the bottom in gold paint. Justice must be louder than silence. Every day, students passed that wall on their way to school. Some paused, some walked faster, but all saw it, and slowly. A new generation began asking questions their parents had been too afraid to ask. Why do we treat some lives as dangerous before they even speak? Why does skin color decide if you get protected or punished? Why are mothers like Naomi still fighting alone? And in those questions, Naomi saw something Eli would have been proud of. She saw resistance. She saw awareness. She saw change. The kind that doesn't come from a verdict, but from a choice made over and over again. To care, to speak, to act. Because at the heart of every act of racism is a lie, and at the heart of every fight for justice is a truth that refuses to die. Naomi Carter carried that truth in her scars, in her silence, and now in her voice, forever.